Government forces deter Houthi rebels attack in Ma'rib. Houthi rebels continue shelling houses of civilians in Hodeidah. Amid war, starvation ghost chases Yemeni women and girls nationwide. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, ROSHAN FOUAD. Tens of Houthi rebels have been killed and others were injured in different fronts in Ma'rib. Military sources said that more than 23 Houthi militants have been killed by government and tribe fires during two fights in Al-Qasara, west of Ma'rib. During two Rahaba, tens of Houthi rebels were killed and others injured over government forces deterred their attack and launched a counter-attack against them. Meanwhile, the coalition jets targeted Houthis in Al-Qasara front, destroyed 3 armed vehicles and killed all those inside them. In Ma'rib, Mashli Jamili, head of Rahaba GPC branch, fell as a martyr along with some of his companions while fighting Houthis. The incidents happened during clashes with Houthi militia who were trying to take back a number of positions in Rahaba. Just moments before dying, Al-Jamili called the tribes in Rahaba to join forces to fight Houthi rebels and to prevent them from using their lands to launch attacks.
Thank God, we inflicted the enemy losses in lives and equipments. We captured a number of military equipment. The front is united and the tribes stand on their borders. We have the ability to advance forward, but we hold on the borders of Ma'rib. We call upon the tribes to prevent Houthis from firing on our positions from their lands. We are neighbors and we have the right of neighbors.
The tribe of Ja'dan called in a statement all Yemenis in Houthi-controlled areas to keep their sons of joining the Houthi fronts. The tribe appealed to Yemenis not to allow their children into the flaring war or to fight their own brothers in Ma'rib. The tribe of Ja'dan asked all free men of Yemen to join forces, reject differences and line up against the Houthi rebels to achieve victory. The tribe in its statement said that the Houthi vision is going to die. Yemeni women and girls have been affected severely because of this mad war. International agencies have indicated that due to the food shortage, women tend to sacrifice their meals to make other family members eat. This report sheds light on how food shortage has negatively affected women in Yemen.
Women and girls have been disproportionately affected by the war in Yemen, including by some of the worst effects of the food crisis. 1.1 million pregnant or lactating women suffered from acute malnourishment in 2018. Evidence from humanitarian crises globally shows that when food is scarce, women often sacrifice their own meals to allow their family members to eat, further increasing the risk they face. Women and children also account for roughly 75% of those displaced in Yemen. Amongst this group, female-headed households are at some of the greatest risk of food insecurity. They have lower monthly incomes and because they have no male presence in the family are increasingly forced to take on non-traditional roles outside the home that expose them to the risk of violence risks that have been intensified by the war. In November 2017, the UN reported that incidents of gender-based violence increased by over 63% since before the conflict. Freedom from violence is essential for women and girls to live full and healthy lives. Gender-based violence stops women and girls' immediate needs from being met and prevents them from reaching their potential. This reality is clearly illustrated in Yemen, where even women with a male in the family are increasingly cut off from the essential services. Staff from Al-Hakim, a Yemeni women's organization, told us, movement restrictions were part of women's reality, but it is now exasperated as men want to protect women from the risks of gender-based violence at checkpoints in order to preserve their honor. The desperation created by the crisis is also contributing to rising numbers of child marriages. More than 2/3 of girls are married before the age of 18, compared to 50% before the crisis began. Child marriage is often a coping mechanism for families because they believe a husband's family can offer better protection or because it can raise dowry payments to cope with conflict-related hardship. Yet, the risks of child, early or forced marriage are well established. These women and girls have children earlier and more frequently and face higher risks of pregnancy-related injuries and death in childbirth. Despite the serious and potentially life-threatening consequences of gender-based violence and poor health services access for women, these sectors suffered major funding shortfalls. As funding levels declined in September 2019, United Nations Population Fund warned over 1 million Yemeni women need funds now, or they will lose access to life-saving reproductive health services, putting their lives and those of their babies at risk.
Recent reports from UNICEF have warned that Houthi rebels, since seizing power, have stopped more than 30% of girls from education in their controlled areas. This report has more on this story.
The Houthi militia has forbidden girls in its main strongholds in Saada Governorate, northern Yemen, from studying for several years, and because of this decision they tried to generalize the experience of ignorance to tens of thousands of Yemeni girls in the governorates under their control, especially the capital Sana'a. According to the United Nations Children's Fund, more than 31% of Yemeni girls are out of education. Houthi violations against Yemeni girls are not limited to the denial of education, but can extend to something more uglier than that, as the cases of underage marriage increase significantly. About 15,000 women study in Yemeni universities compared to 60,000 men, which makes the percentage of female graduates in the country only about 11%. Around half of Yemeni girls attend primary school, and 2 out of 3 women in the country are illiterate. The World Economic Forum's annual gender gap report ranked Yemen as the worst country for women to live out of the 136 countries surveyed. A major obstacle for women attending university in Yemen is the lack of support for girls in primary and secondary schools. Because Yemeni families are often deterred to let men teach their daughters, few schools have sufficient staff to educate large number of girls. Those girls in turn might attend university and later return home to work. Education is a weapon for every woman. The enemies want to take that power away from her, not because of the cultural view, but because they fear of women, especially those in Yemen. If they get educated, they might compete for political seats. Women in Yemen have the wisdom and strong belief in applying the knowledge they gain. Educating a male means educating an individual, but educating a female is educating the whole family.
In Hodeidah, Houthi militia renewed shelling civilian houses south of the city. According to local sources, residential villages were bombarded with mortar shells and heavy weapons into Haita, Faza, and Hais areas south of the city, causing fear and panic among civilians. In the Mar, Houthi militia launched another ballistic missile from a military training center. Sources said that the target of the rocket is not known yet. Sources added that the launching of this Houthi ballistic rocket comes hours after Houthi failed to launch a rocket from the same place. Coming next. Houthis continue crimes against forcibly disappeared people.
منطقة الروضة استهدف الأطفال الأبرياء اللي يلعبوا في الشارع. بيدعي للسلام يقول له للسلام يقتل أطفالنا يقاتل أطفالنا الأبرياء.
أنا قلت افتجعت ولا قلنا يقع واحد صاروخ ثاني. طلعت البيت حقنا. عشان أنا ألعب أنا وأصحابي والصاروخ انطرح.
During the past 7 years, enforced disappearance and torture have been regular crimes committed by the Houthi militia rebels to silence their opponents. The following report details the crimes carried out by the rebels in this regard.
In conjunction with the International Day of Victims of Enforced Disappearances, the Human Rights Office in the Yemeni capital Sana'a revealed that the number of enforced disappearances carried out by the Houthi militia has exceeded 1,400 cases of disappeared during the past 7 years. The crimes of torture committed by the Houthi militia ranged from flogging, hanging, deprivation of sleep, using salt on wounds, physical torture, melting plastic on the body, torture by preventing drinking water, complete health neglect, putting needles under nails, and burning with cigarettes. The director of the office, Fahm al-Zubairi, said that the Houthi militia continues the crimes of kidnapping citizens in the capital, their disappearance in unknown prisons, and the denial of their presence, which aggravate the suffering and tragedies of the families and relatives of the disappeared. The most enforced disappearance crimes of the militia increased in 2016 by 282 crimes, which is equivalent to 20%. Also, real numbers far exceed what was monitored as a result of the victims' reluctance to provide information for fear of being kidnapped again by the militia, he added. Fahmy called on the international community and human rights organizations to put pressure on the Houthi militia to reveal the forcibly disappeared, stop blackmailing their families, and release them urgently. In the same context, the Association of Mothers of Yemeni Abductees organized a protest in Ta'az, demanding the release of the kidnapped and forcibly disappeared. A statement issued during the protest revealed the presence of 152 civilians forcibly disappeared for years and called on the international and local community to support the families of the forcibly disappeared and to unite efforts to reveal the fate of their children. Mothers of the Yemeni abductees urged the United Nations to provide the necessary psychological support to the victims of enforced disappearance and their families, as it also called on the UN Security Council to take strict actions against the militia. According to reports, victims of enforced disappearance in prisons and secret detention centers face great risks that threaten their lives, as 40 civilians died under torture during the period of their disappearance, as the Houthi militia placed those forcibly disappeared in detention locations that are subject to bombing, which led to the killing of 21 forcibly disappeared, and there are 14 of those who suffer from chronic diseases. Not to mention that prior to their abduction, their relatives had known nothing about their health for years. The Houthis' continuous humanitarian violations against civilians, especially in Sana'a, proves that the militia's acts are inhuman.
The United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator for Yemen, David Grisley, warned that some agencies may cut their programs, including water and health, due to the lack of funding as of September. Vital sectors are still lacking severe funding. The UN official called on donors to provide adequate funding to all sectors to enable relief agencies to avoid worse situations. Houthi militia admitted that they had confiscated a cargo of humanitarian assistance that was meant to be sent to thousands of families. The militia said on their media channels that the cargo was brought by the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization intended to distribute this aid cargo to families who live in disease-hit areas. On a different level, Houthi militia arrested an artist in the capital Sana'a. Local sources indicated that the militia stormed a wedding party hosted by the artist Asil Ali Abu Bakr, arrested him and took his musical instruments. This comes in the context of the Houthi militia constant war against the arts, beauty, and everything that has life in it. Education in Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen is facing a lot of problems. These problems are Houthi-induced. The rebels are trying to control the educational content and plan to give their members certificates that they do not deserve. More of this is within this story.
It is no more than a real mess. This is the case of education in Yemen, especially in Houthi-controlled areas. Houthis' manipulation in the educational process in the country is continuing. They not only introduce alteration to the educational content, but also ignoring the process as a whole through their negligence of all the tools. The pressure is mounting on the government-run schools after the fees of the private ones increased. There are no classes, and the parents are suffering to secure a place for their children. As to the teachers, They are underpaid and try hard to cope with high prices and inflation. Moreover, the school books are not available, and the parents have to go to the black market in order to get one with a higher price. Houthis' manipulation are ongoing. The rebels are trying as well to give education credit to those who has no educational credentials. Sources in the educational field said that the militia is preparing a plan to grant secondary school certificates. The sources added that thousands of members who align to the militia are waiting for these certificates, despite that they didn't acquire the basic education. The Houthi plan, according to sources, is secretive. Those who are on the waitlist will have a customized syllabus that is entitled to the Mujahideen or the Houthi fighters. The syllabus will contain materials that incite hatred, sectarianism, and aggression. The sources expected those members to acquire university degrees later in an illegal way in order to take the places of employees who the rebels have doubts about their orientations. The new intended Houthi crime will be a hard one for Yemen. They are blocking education and are trying to hand the country over to a group of killers and bankrupt.
The American Department of State announced that Washington has donated more than 151,000 coronavirus doses. The American Secretary of State said that the U.S. is committed to help provide vaccines around the world, and this country gave Yemen more than $108 million as a support against COVID-19. The Yemeni Ministry of Health said earlier that the country has received more than 151,000 doses of Johnson & Johnson vaccines as a first batch coming from the U.S. The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced the registration of 40 new cases of the epidemic in 6 governorates. Committee officials said on Twitter that 20 cases were recorded in Hadramaut, 8 in Aden, 5 in Ma'rib, 5 in Lahj, 1 in Shabwa, and 1 in Mahra. Also 3 deaths were documented, 2 in Hadramaut and 1 in Taiz, plus 24 recovered cases, 15 in Aden, 5 in Hadramaut, and 4 in Taiz. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 7,869, including 1,470 deaths and 4,837 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. Government forces deter Houthi rebels attack in Ma'rib. Houthi rebels continue shelling houses of civilians in Hodeidah. Amid war, starvation ghost chases Yemeni women and girls nationwide. This is the end of the news. It was ROSHAN FOUAD. Thank you for watching.